giving you useful and practical tips to help you make more money selling travel. This is the Art of Selling Travel Podcast, and here to guide you through it all, your host, Glenda Beagle.
You know, when I look through my DMs or my emails and try and pinpoint what is the most asked question that I get, I have to say it is about host agencies. So the first question we're going to clear up. No, I do not run a host agency. I did have a team of independent contractors back when I owned my own agency. And that was actually where I discovered that I really wanted to become a coach. I wanted to help build other people's businesses, and that it was really and truly about diving into the struggles that travel advisors face rather than the day-to-day operations of an agency. So that is first and foremost. Now, in this episode, we're going to dive into a little bit of how do you choose an agency, or just simply give you some things to start thinking on. Now, this episode, I have had kind of on a back burner for months and months and months and months, because in some ways there are too many layers to this. So I promise you, there will be even more episodes coming in the new year where we're going to go deeper into this, and we're going to talk about some of the other sorts of things. But first and foremost, I wanted to just kind of get things going. The other thing is this is probably also my most researched episode. We've done a series of questionnaires. We've done a series of polls. We've done surveys, all different sorts of things to gather up the information for this episode. But really and truly, it's how do you get going? How do you pick a host agency? Now, the problem sometimes with quote unquote picking a host agency is this fear and panic that you are going to have this host agency for the rest of your life. Here's the deal. It does not mean that the host agency you pick today is the one you are going to be with 3 years from now, 4 years from now. I will say, however, that there is some conversation in a lot of the surveys we did and a lot of the questionnaires we did, conversations we've had with travel advisors, that switching down the road is definitely a lot of work. But that in itself, we're going to make an episode all to its own, because some of that I think is mindset, some of that is actual, and some of that there are ways around it. And so, like I said, that's going to become its own episode. So when you choose a host or even a consortia, it's not forever. Now, here's something else. Sometimes I hear travel advisors say that I'm picking this host agency because they're with this organization or that organization, or because we have access to these luxury products, because it does not mean that your host agency is going to be a part of those programs for forever. One, they may not qualify. Two, there may be a falling out at a leadership level with the two organizations. Three, host agencies are in it for business, which means if it no longer suits their best interest, they're not going to do it. So make sure you are choosing to work with the people you want to work with. Not 100% of it is going to be based on the programming, because I know of host agencies that just within my time of knowing them over the past, 8 years, 10, oh heavens, 10 years. Oh my, 10 years already. Okay. I always laugh when people, chasing a squirrel, when people would say to me, oh, that was just a year or two ago. And then you'd look back, you're like, no, that's like a decade or two ago. I think I'm that many days old now that I am now hitting that point where I was like, oh, I've only known them for a short while. Oh, I've known them a decade. Oh my heavens. And realizing how short of my life that is. Anyways. So again, you want to make sure that that is not the only reason that you're choosing somebody. If they are part of this network, if they are a part of this, whatever it is, I'm not going to name names, but that is a very important part of it. I want to just touch real quick on switching, because I think when you're choosing a host agency, especially if you're switching from one, and like I said, we're going to do a whole other episode into the new year about switching agencies, but I think this is a really important part of it. You need to make a pro-con list. You've got to take the emotion out of it. Because if you don't know what it is that you like, you must list the pros of the agency you're with, the host agency you're with, or the consortia, or whatever it is. Because no matter how many things are bad, there is still something good in there. And I'm going to tell you that usually if you say, I can't find anything good, the problem might not be as much them as, I don't want to say it's you, but, just saying. Because the thing is that one, we need to know the things that we liked, the things that we appreciated, the things that we enjoyed, the things we utilize. Because if you don't know what those are, it's going to make it really hard to know kind of what that minimum requirement is going into the next agency. So once you have the list of what it is that you liked, what it is you used, what it is that you appreciated, maybe even it was just simply that there was a human on the other side. Maybe there was, you liked their list of preferred suppliers. Whatever it is, it kind of gives you that base level of where it is that the next one needs to be. Next comes what's missing or what came up short. Maybe they promised you X, but they only gave you R. Whatever that is, you need to make that list, because if the reason that you're switching is you need, want, or must have X, you need to make sure that is on the list going forward into the next agency, or you're just going to be right back here in the same position, in the same situation, in a very short amount of time. And frankly, that doesn't help anybody in the long run. So what was missing? What came up short? What was promised but not delivered? And then when you look at those, what was promised but not delivered, how was it promised? Where did the delivery fall short? Because again, and I said this last week on the episode, when you are talking to a host agency, you are talking to their sales team. They're going to pump it up. They're going to make it sound like they are the very best thing in the whole entire world. They're a salesperson. So I'm also going to say, if on the flip side of it, you get on there and you're like, do you even like your company? Remember, this is their salesperson. So you want to make sure that you are having a conversation with them that makes you feel reassured. One of the comments came up when I was going through here. And of course, I did not hide. Oh, yes, here it was. One of the comments that came up is, I think it's important you meet several different hosts to find out what you like and don't like. Sometimes you just get a good or bad feeling. I almost signed with a host because they were the best of the worst, but something didn't feel settled. I reached out to a travel agent for their opinion because they weren't the host telling them why I needed to join them. She kept talking about her host, and I said I didn't want to add another agency to my frazzled brain. But when I asked, what would you do differently, or what do you wish you knew? She replied with, she wished she would have joined her host sooner. I ended up meeting with her agency, and I just felt at ease, and I knew it was the right choice that I had been waiting for. See, here's the deal. When your gut is telling you something's off, it's really important to listen to it. Yes, maybe it is fear. That is a very good possibility. But it also, too, could be something inside of you saying, something's just not right. It's not lining up. I know when I opened my franchise, I had to go through all the hoops, because being a franchise owner is different. At least here in Canada, it is different than opening or joining a host agency. I know that there's some in the US that I don't fully understand it, because they're calling themselves franchises, but really they're a host agency, the way that they're operating, at least from the outside looking in. When I owned my agency, my franchise, it was more like owning a Taco Bell or a Boston Pizza or whatever it is. Like, yes, I use their branding. Yes, I use this. Yes, I use that. But everything else was mine. And I had to pay a monthly franchise fee, which was exorbitant. And there was a lot of other things. And we will definitely be talking about that in a future episode as well, in terms of understanding your ROI on things like branding and evolution and whatnot. But the thing is, though, is that I remember having to sell myself to them. And looking back, yes, it was the right choice at the time. But looking back, I also see some of the things that I wished I would have done differently. I wish I might have looked around. I wish that I did not think that I was in desperate need of having a big brand. I was coming into a town or into a city where there was already another major brand. So it was, how do I stand out? How do I set up my brand? Funny thing, most people never heard of the brand before. So I still had to do brand awareness. So, anyways, that is neither here nor there. That will be in another episode. But when somebody says to me, can you help me find an agency? I'm going to always suggest that you go and check some of the online resources like host agency reviews. Now, the problem with host agency reviews is that they don't list everybody. They really and truly have the big guys. I'm not entirely sure how their business model works in terms of if it's pay to play or what, but based on the fact that it seems like only the big agencies are listed on there, that's the indication that I'm getting from it. But I don't have verification of that. So in which case, I'm not saying that for sure. But what I am saying is that there is a lot of other host agencies, more the mom and pop shop ones, that are not listed on there. But that kind of becomes the question. What size of an agency do you want? Do you want to be with thousands of other travel advisors? When you are with thousands of other travel advisors, they are going to have, in theory, again, we are making assumptions. We all know what happens when we assume. But from the outside looking in on some of those large ones, they should have a lot of systems and processes in place. They should have a support team in place. Now, I will say, as having bought a franchise with the intention of being big, being a brand, they should have all these things. I can tell you the one that I did not. And so don't just assume that size will dictate everything. Now, some people want that mom and pop shop, and I totally get it. Having that more individualized, being a person rather than a number or an email or whatever it is. The problem to that, or the flip to that, is do they actually have time to help you? Do they have time to be guiding you? Do they have time? Do they have systems? Because there's a lot of mom and pop shop agencies, if you will, that are bringing on ICs, either to offload their own work, or two, they're trying to build their business, but they don't have the bandwidth to actually take care of them. They don't have the bandwidth or the bookkeepers or whatever it is to make sure that everything gets done in a timely manner. So you want to make sure that you're looking at that. The next is that host agency very niche specific. I talk with a lot of advisors who are like, but I love Disney, so I might as well just sell Disney. So I'm going to look for a Disney only agency. And so my question always becomes, are you a Disney fanatic for a season, or are you a Disney fanatic for life? And a lot are saying, well, it's just what I know right now, but it's not where I want to stay. And so again, when we're choosing a host agency, we don't necessarily want to buy for what we're looking at today. If you are, let's say you have a toddler, you are not going to buy next year's clothes for today's size, because that's not going to be the size they're in. So in which case, yes, like I was a young mom. I had to save my money where I could. So I would buy things when they were on the clearance sale. Now my children were like growing like stinkweeds. They're now 6'4" and 6'9". So, they were hard to keep up to, but I did buy them a couple of sizes bigger on the clearance sale so that next year I would already have their winter coats that I got for 75% off or whatever, rather than trying to buy it at the time. You got to look to what you want that future to look like. Do you want to be a cruise only advisor? Because if your world is not cruise only, you want to add in adventure, you want to add in a lot of land and everything else. Does it make sense to align yourself with a cruise only host agency or a cruise focused? Because some will say, we're not cruise only, we're just cruise focused, or we're not Disney only, we're just Disney focused. The question becomes, what do the preferred supplier lineup look like of their non-focused niche? Because you want to make sure that you're still getting access to those great commissions. Again, sometimes travel advisors will look, well, I'm getting a 90-10 split if I do this. But 90-10 of a 10% commission versus 90 or 80-20 of a 20% commission makes a massive financial difference. And therefore, it's not just the front number that needs to be calculated. If you want to sell something specific, and that's not the focus of that agency, it's important to look at what is their preferred supplier lineup and what do those commissions look like, because you want to be looking at what all of those apples to apples look like. Again, it's not just what your percentage of the commission is going to be of the commission, but rather what is that back end of the commission going to be? Because again, if this supplier is getting 10% and this supplier is getting 20%, and we're talking $1,000, so we're going to do some quick math off the top of our head without some paper. So if it is $1,000 that they're getting 10% of, and you get 90% of that, you get $90. But if you get 80% with host agency 2, but they get 20%, you're getting 80% of 200, which is $160. So we are a $70 difference on that one booking. Let's multiply that by 10 bookings or 20 bookings. And suddenly we are at an entirely different game of what your income can be, even though you're quote unquote making less commission. So it's not just the front number, but what is the back number to that? The next question you need to ask yourself is, how much autonomy do you want to have? Do you want to have somebody who's all up in your business all the time, who's telling you what to do, how to do it, and everything else? Or do you want to be off on your own? What does that look like? Now, here's the interesting thing. When I did the survey, I asked them, what do travel advisors want? What do they want from their host agencies? And in particular, what do they think about the training that they receive from their host? So first and foremost, the things that they think makes a great host is specific support. So support came up over and over and over again. But then some of them also narrowed down into they want specific supports. They want to make sure that they're going to get quick responses. If they need help on dealing with a supplier, dealing with this, that, or the other, that they're going to get quick responses. They also want to make sure that they're going to get quick, timely invoicing and commission payouts. A lot of them said they want to know how to run their business, that their host agency isn't providing that. Professionalism. This one came up a lot. Hey, host agencies, if you're listening, there is a lot of travel advisors that are deeply disappointed by the professionalism of the executives. That one came up a lot. They want to make sure that they have great supplier or great relationships with the suppliers. And not just being a number was an important one too. I was actually chatting with a friend of mine once who was telling me that she was sitting on a flight with somebody from a very large host agency who proceeded to tell her all sorts of things that would otherwise be information that should only be shared within the agency. And then she looked at her, she goes, well, you're in our host agency, aren't you? And they said, no, I'm not. So again, it's that professionalism. It's making sure that they know who people are, that they're not just making assumptions. Well, are you with us or not? It's actually knowing who they are. But this was what I found really, really interesting. 78% of the responders wanted more business training, and not supplier, but more in the actual sales training, overcoming objections, and also in how to run the business. Of the responders, only 18% wanted a higher commission. So often they're going to lead off with, we're going to offer you more commission. We're going to give you this. We're going to give you that. We're going to give you all of these sorts of things. But interestingly enough, that was not the leading request of the people that filled out this survey. We then asked them, how much are you paying? Or how much did it cost to get started? Now, this is something that's really, really interesting. And so I'm going to address it. I think we're going to do another episode just on this alone. But you're in business. If you are an independent contractor, you're in business. Being a travel advisor has a very low entry for the most part, which is a double-edged sword because it allows anybody and everybody to join the travel industry. but yet you're not going to open up a store on Main Street or open up something else without startup capital. You've got to have cash flow because it's going to take months and months and months before commission starts coming through. And that's just simply due to the nature of buying cycles, to the fact that for most suppliers, commissions don't get paid out till the clients travel. And usually that's a couple of months of working with them before they travel. And then you've got the processing for them to send it to the host and then the host to send to you. So, on average, you're anywhere from 6 to 9 months at times before you can see your first commission check. And so there's a lot that are like, oh, I started with them because it didn't cost me anything. Here's the deal. When it doesn't cost you anything, I promise you, you're not going to get anything back out of it in the same way, because they need the resources in order to be able to train you. There's got to be things involved. Just because you can do it for free doesn't mean you should. Just because you can start a business for free doesn't mean you don't need to have cash flow. Doesn't mean that you don't need to have resources set aside. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. But anyways, so the average responders are, as we went through, we did have a number of them that said it didn't cost anything. And then we had where startups were about $500 on average. There were some of them that were a little bit below. And I think on the high side, we saw about $1,000. That is pocket change. That is pocket change for the type of business you have the ability to build. I do know, just from my own personal knowledge, that there are some of them out there that then offer programming and other such and can be upwards of $10,000 or $15,000. So again, just be prepared. What do I get for joining at this price? What can I be expected to pay? Again, annually, we had free, we had $197 to about $697 for annual fees, and then monthly typically varied based on commission level. And the average of our responders was about $50. Again, we had $0 up to about $100 a month is what the monthly fees were. And when you got up there a little bit higher, we were talking in the 90-95% commission range. So it really and truly does depend on what it is that you are looking for. Now, interestingly, I remember speaking with a CPA here in Canada, and the one thing he said to me, because I wasn't charging my ICs anything to be a part of my team, I charged actually the first handful, I didn't even charge them to take the training. I did charge for my training afterwards, but my CPA came to me and he said, you are at risk of being in a gray zone for Canada Revenue in the event that they check it out, because you're not charging them. So are they an employee or are they an independent contractor? I'm like, oh, they're 100% independent. He goes, so in which case they're building their own business. And he goes, being in business means there are fees. There's costs associated, because at that time I was paying for their email address. I was paying for a lot of things. And so then we were like, oh, no, we're going to have to pass that on. We're going to have to charge them for it, because of the fact that I needed to show that they had expenses, that they had to pay for these things. And so again, depending on your jurisdiction, depending on that, you need to make sure that there's a clear defined boundary of what is your expense and what is theirs. Another one that came up was, do they offer professional development that's not supplier, but actual practical business and business setting goals? So we were talking about the actual, help you to develop your business, not just sell more of this, more of that, but actually build out a business. And a couple of them said, actually, it's a regular part of it. And others said, never. Now, a couple of them, this was really interesting, expressed concerns over the trainers that they used, because they were using other travel advisors within the network to do the training for them. And they said, they're travel advisors that have the time, which means it's because they're not actually selling. And they're not selling because they don't know how. And so they said they really called into question the qualifications. Now, in fairness, this is something I have kind of wondered about over the years as well, because I have seen some of the mentorship programs and other such. The travel advisors I wanted to mentor with did not have time to mentor me. And keeping in mind, not all mentorship is free. We're going to chase a squirrel for a second. Free mentorship is worth typically what you get or what you pay. A lot of mentorship, a lot of people assume that I'm just going to have a mentor because it's free. Mentorship is not always free. Doesn't mean they're officially a coach, but for a lot, like I have mentors, I have coaches, I pay them all because there are things that I learn from them. And perhaps some of them, there's one in particular, I don't quote unquote pay cash, but I pay with my services. I pay with my time. I pay with my other resources to infuse back into that relationship. It is a give and take on that one. But anyways, what this, and the one in particular pointed out, and they will stay anonymous because they had given me the name of their host and other such. And they said, I guarantee you the people they're using don't have the education, knowledge, or training. And they definitely don't have the sales to back up what it is that they're teaching. So I found that really, really interesting. So when you are having those conversations with a potential host, who is it that's doing your training? What is their qualifications, if you will, to be the ones that are doing it? Because there's a lot of host agencies that bring in really phenomenal, be it speakers, be it that maybe they do have mentors. There is some of them that will have said, you know what, I no longer want to sell travel full time. I myself, that was part of when I started making my switch. I didn't want to sell full time anymore. And so in which case I started doing other things, taking on other roles. And it wasn't that I couldn't, it wasn't that I did. I literally gave up clients in order to find the time. So find out what that looks like. Find out what it is that means. So now these were a couple of other notes that came forward that I just want to share because I think that they were super important. So the one that came on here, is your host dedicated to the travel business or is their focus split between multiple businesses? If it's split, do they have proper support systems in place for the agents when there is an issue or support needed? Commission split isn't everything. If there's no support, when there's an issue from something from nothing is still nothing. And I think that one was really, really poignant because I have seen that. There are some people who own host agencies just as an investment, just as a... as an investment. And so they're collecting people and it's not necessarily about how do they turn them out to be the best. Another one responded with, my previous agency had red flags. My previous agency had financial red flags. My current one is a good agency, but they are weird with how people do things. And so, sometimes there can be some quirks, we're dealing in a human business, but at the same time, it's also really and truly important that anytime you see a financial red flag, that you pay attention. Now, it might be that commissions are taking far too long to pay out. It could be that they're pushing back on every commission. It could be any number of things. I also had somebody else reach out to me several months ago, and that was really kind of where this started. But at the same time, it's very overwhelming, this particular question. And I still don't have a clear, defined answer. But they had found out through another method, and that the host agency that they were about to sign with was actually under impending litigation where for a second company, but all the companies were under the same corporate. And here's the deal. Because of that, because they were all under the same corporation or LLC or whatever it was, depending on what country they were in, the host agency could be affected by what happened with this other company because it was all within one umbrella. Not to mention the fact that based on what they were explaining, this is not somebody I would want to be in business with, period. But I think it's important to do your due diligence. Do your research. Do understand who the owner is. Understand the people that are working. Is there red flags? Like, do a background check. It's not just you trying to sell yourself to them, because a good host agency is going to want to have a credit check. They're going to want to have a security check on you, different things like that, because they need to know that you're not going to be fraudulent. But at the same time, too, you need to do a little bit of background just to make sure that the company is decent. You want to look for reviews. You want to possibly see if you can track down advisors, especially the agencies that have the directories. Reach out to a couple of random travel advisors that are listed on there and just say, hey, I'm thinking of possibly joining this host agency. Would you mind sharing with me your thoughts on it? Let me know what you think. If there's specific questions that I should be asking, just randomly check a few. Now, I do want to touch on the fact that what happens if you get into the wrong one, or you get into one that's not a right fit? It's not your fault, first and foremost, because when you're joining a host agency, you only know what you know. You do not have all of the information. You do not have everything you're ever going to know, particularly when you are brand new, because you don't know what you don't know. Now, the difference is when you know that you're in a bad relationship, and really and truly, when you're in business, is just like if you're with an intimate partner type thing. If you're in a bad relationship and you choose to stay, now that is your choice. That is where you've shifted it. Because when you enter that relationship and you don't know any better, you don't know any better. But once you know better, you should do better. And so, like I said, in the new year, we're going to have some episodes on how to switch agencies, what to do to go about doing that, but also to how to set up your business from the start so that that's never an issue. You always have the ability to exit gracefully if that need should arrive. And then finally, another comment that came through that I want to share, and again, this is coming off of the survey. The person had said, the host is your support, not the motivator. They don't push you to meet quotas or anything, and I had to learn the difference. It's your business. You have to make it work. And I think that is a really, really important one. And in fact, that's part of why we are launching, we've created Launch to Lift Off. It is a brand new program that's going to be kicking off in January. You can go to artofsellingtravel.com/launch. To get the details. This is definitely designed for those that are new. I would say really, if you haven't hit your first 100,000 in sales, definitely this is the program for you, because we're going to walk you through how to launch your business and then how to get it to lift off, because you can launch and never go anywhere. We want you to go from launch to liftoff and get ready to take flight. So again, go to artofsellingtravel.com/launch and we'll get you all the details there. And until next time, happy selling, and we'll catch you on the next episode.